Brocast is back, baby.
This Brewcast episode is brought to you by the Brewcast Store. Explore a store filled with awesome goodies from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered. Stay in style with Brewcast. Embrace the shock, set the trend. Visit now brew-cast.com/store. Link below.
Back with the fire, can't you see the flames? From Deutschland steps comes the Brewcast name. Voices like thunder breaking all the chains. Unleash the fury like a runaway train.
Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to another Brewcast episode. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate the show 5 stars. This will ensure that the podcast recommends to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. Brewcast also on Instagram, X, and TikTok, where I upload shorts with the highlights of the show. So follow now, Brewcast on Instagram, X, and TikTok. Links in the description below.
Here we thrive, we survive.
Hey there, Brewcast fans! The last giveaway was a huge success. If you haven't seen it already, go check it out under the live part on our YouTube channel. See if you won. We gave that awesome cap that we were talking about away. It belongs to one of you. Go check it out if you won. And for the next giveaway, yes, we are doing another one. We are giving away the Power Up Brewcast shirt. This shirt can be yours. All you have to do is subscribe, but we're changing the giveaway rules a little bit this time because it was a huge success. There's so many of you now. Now, in order to participate in the giveaway, you need to subscribe and comment. Comment anything that you like. Comment what you thought about the video, comment potato if you feel like it. As long as you subscribe and you comment, we're gonna be selecting you to win this awesome, beautiful t-shirt at the end of March 2025. That's it. It's that easy. Subscribe, comment, and we're gonna reveal the winner of the giveaway at the end of March 2025. We're talking about YouTube comments because now on Spotify you can also comment, but it's about YouTube, right? Subscribe on YouTube, comment on YouTube, and you're gonna be winning, maybe, who knows? You're gonna be running to win this awesome, beautiful giveaway. And that's about it. Subscribe, comment. Our guest today is Eric G. Eric G is the author of The Power of Personality. He has typed over 50,000 people redefining success through self-awareness and challenging pop psychology myths. All right, Eric, how are you doing?
Oh, how's it going? Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm extremely curious about you, about what you do. So let's start with psychology types. What are those?
Yeah. I think normally there's so many books on these kinds of things, right? Where people put you into different colors and that kind of stuff. But really, it's more about, I think of personality typing as not putting people into boxes, but understanding that there are certain patterns of behavior. We all understand, like, when we get along with certain types of people better than others, we relate to certain types of people better than others. And I think for me, it's more about understanding those patterns of behavior and really like tapping into like all that people experience that we all have throughout all the years of experience that we've, met with people, interacted with people, and helping to use that to understand the different types of people.
All right. So it's like a simplified way of categorizing people's personalities. Is that a way?
Yeah, it's a nice little shortcut, hopefully, to go, oh, okay, and I use animals types, so that makes it
Really?
a lot easier, right? Yeah, so, yeah, it's easy to remember. Like, people are like, oh, okay, that guy's a fox. Okay, I get that. Yeah, I see that in him, or the person's a shark. And it's a very quick shortcut to understand why we do the things we do, and really ideally to understand it better, right? It's like not important just to know, oh, this person's kind of like harsh or like straightforward and direct, but it's also like, why? Like, what are the strengths of that? Like, why do they exactly act that way? So that we're not like hating on each other.
I see. All right. So one of the ways you do is through animals. So what's your animal?
Flattering, or probably one of the least flattering.
Why?
Mine's a baboon. So
What?
I tell people that, like, if they're a baboon, they get all mad, and I'm like, hey, I'm one too. Baboons can be kind of loud, but I think of like Rafiki in The Lion King. And granted, like, I know he's a mandrill technically, but everyone just knows him as a baboon, and how he like kind of like promotes him on like is like preaching. And I think baboons can be a bit preachy at their worst, but they're really big on like having a principle or having something to believe in and then advocating for that. And that's kind of why I use the term the baboon.
Yeah, a lot of incredible value. Yeah, that's so interesting. But Mandrill, is that what you said?
Yeah, I think that's technically what, you know, Rafiki, that character in The
Yeah.
Lion King. I think that's technically what he is, a mandrill. I've been caught on that online because I said baboon and people are like, that's a mandrill. That's not a baboon. Yeah. So they got the face, they got the colorful face and everything. I don't have a colorful face myself, but you know.
Oh, so what's the difference between a mandarin and a baboon? I'm sorry to check. Let's check it out. 1 second. Yeah.
Yeah, the face, I don't know. They both probably show everyone their butts. You know, I don't know. They're just, that's probably the only difference I can tell.
Oh, I need to share the screen with the audience. Give me a second. Application, Google Chrome. No, window capture. 1 second, everyone. Firefox. There we go. Found it. So let's see the difference between Mandarin and Baboon. Yeah, the face for sure. The colorful face. You're right.
They both look pretty angry, though. I mean, baboons can get pretty angry. The baboon personality type is the type that's very easy-go-lucky and or happy-go-lucky and easygoing, and can seem very chill. But then if you touch or if you like invade something that they value, then they might get pretty angry. So, like a principal, generally.
Okay, so that's some of the qualities that you identify with.
Yeah, you know, I mean, among other things, obviously that's a very simple version or a simplified way to look at it. There's in the book, obviously it goes in depth in terms of like what's the core value of each type. And then, you know, certain types share the same core value. So that's why you're going to get along better with other people or relate to them better. And as I go in the book, like about half the population shares the same value. So that's great for them because you know what you think of like safety and security. Like think of the values that we grow up, like being told that we should value, right? Like having a secure job, like doing well in school, like doing all your homework, being kind and following all the rules of society, getting married, having children, all those things. They're all about like creating a sense of security. And that's why it's so prevalent because half the population has that value. But of course, in the book, I try to talk about like the other people who don't share that value because it's not necessarily the case with the other half of the population.
Interesting. Would you say there's a personality type that is the most common among most people?
Yes, and I don't use the word common just because people hate that,
Oh,
right? Like
yeah.
you're like, oh, I don't want to be the most, I don't want to be like half the population, but I'd say about like I break them up into packs. So there are personality packs. So there are 4 major packs, and then within those packs there are 4 animal types. So you know, doing the math, that's 4 times 4 is 16. So we have 16 different personality types. But each of if you share the same pack, then you're probably going to relate to other animal types within that pack, right? And one of those packs I call the gatherers, and they make up about half the population. So those 4 animal types are the most common. They make up approximately about 12 to 15% of the population, each one. So that's quite a bit, right? And they're usually going to be people in, I wouldn't say power, but they're in positions of supervisory roles, management roles, things of that nature. They're the kid who growing up, and if you had them in your like group, you were working on a team assignment, they would be one of the kids you'd be like, okay, this is what we're going to do, guys. We should do this, this, and this. So generally they move into leadership positions. So they do have aside from being 50% of the population, they do have an oversized influence on the way we think and the way that we feel like we should be, even though it might not necessarily fit best for us.
Wow, that's so interesting. I heard the other day that a lot of people who are in positions of power or authority, they tend to be very extrovert. Not necessarily because, and they end up, because they are extrovert, they end up being in those positions because this extroversion is perceived as confiance. How do you say this in English? It's they're confident, right, on what they do. They're secure on the way they speak, etc. They not necessarily want those positions, but other people just put them there because they just don't feel comfortable speaking their mind or they're not very well articulated. But just because those other people are, they just end up putting them in the spotlight. Does it make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like the more confident you are, especially if you're one of those types that's like half the population, then you know it works because the thing that you value matches the thing that everyone's telling you should value. So you never really have those moments of like, oh, am I doing things correctly? It's almost always like I am doing things correctly, and I just got to figure out the best way to do those things. Whereas some of the other personality types where they only make up maybe 8% of the population, they have a difficulty fitting in because they're like, wow, like I want something different than, that's being told I should want. There must be something wrong with me. And then it takes a while for them to like kind of have that full grasp of who they are and gain that confidence. So it might be a slow burn for them to get into positions of leadership where you're right. Like certain people, they're more outgoing and they're more outward in their orientation, and they fit in that major pack, then they are going to be put in positions of leadership.
Yeah. What kind of personality do you think? So you said that like we can define, we can like use animals as like how would you say, like a representation of the personalities, but you also mentioned there are like 16 types, right? 16 animals total. Do they have those different personality types? They also have names that are not the animal names?
No, I just use the animals as archetypes, right? So if you're like, oh, this person's a fox or this person's a shark, obviously there's the greater pack. So the 4 packs are gatherers, hunters, shamans, and smiths.
Ooh.
And so all the 4 animals under each one of those are going to share the same core value. So obviously gatherers, I had mentioned before, safety and security. Hunters, which make up about a third of the population, value excitement, like visceral excitement, getting the most out of life. Shamans value self-knowledge, and then smiths value information. So you can see how all those things are important, and we all value those things, but it's really more in which ones we prioritize over the other, right? And I think when you understand that, then you start going, oh, okay, these are the reasons why we fit into this group. I talk to a lot of people, and they're like, wow, how they say, I found my tribe, or I found my people. It's generally you're finding people who are maybe you're a minority pack and you find people who are in that pack that you never interacted with before. And it's like, wow, okay, I'm not weird, or even if I am weird, at least the other people are weird and we can all share that weirdness together versus like being by yourself all your life.
I really like how you separated like the categories and the animals. There's no like worm in there. Like or you're like a shaman. You're not like I don't know, like it doesn't matter. But what I mean is like you're not putting anyone down. Like everyone should be celebrated regardless of their own characteristics. Yeah. So Eric, I want to ask you how all of this came about, where the interest on developing all of those personality types and names and categories came from.
I was younger, when I was probably in high school, so that's not that young, but yeah, youngish, adolescence, right? And I was one of those minority types where I had a value system that didn't necessarily fit what I was being taught, like in school, which is fine. I understand it now, but back then it makes you feel like crap, right? And you're like, wow, what's wrong with me? And so I got really into reading lots of books on personality that go over like introversion, extroversion, different personality types. Myers-Briggs is a big one. And I studied all of that. And I started my education company that I ran for about a decade. And through that education company, we worked with about 1,000 students and parents a year. And, meeting all these different students and parents and teachers, working with them, I started understanding that there was more to it than that. And I developed my own personality typing methodology based on the practical experience I had working with my own teachers and my own students for that decade. And, I developed it and, I started a website on it. There's a website that you can go to that you can take a test to find out what animal you are. And then I decided to write a book on it because at the end of the day, I'm always like, online tests are online tests, right? They're all cookie cutter. And even like if you buy a book and they have like this 70 question test in front of it, that's still a cookie cutter test, right? So at the end of the day, I think it's more important to understand the methodology, which is what my book goes over, so that, you can really discover who you are.
That's so interesting. And we're not talking about those tests that people used to do on Facebook, like discover which Harry Potter character you are, and then you just submit all your data and they give you. It's not that we're talking about, right?
Put your email address and your social security number. No, it's not. The fun thing, people love tests like that. And the funny thing is, if you learn my personality typing methodology, you can put characters right into different types. In the book, I use a lot of pop culture, right, to help people like go, oh, okay, I'm like Hermione or I'm like Harry. At the end of the day, people are always going to want to be the main character. And I'm always like, no, let's just identify with who you identify within the world. I use Game of Thrones a lot. Like on the website, there's a Game of Thrones test you can take, which is pretty much a modified version of the personality assessment. And it'll put you into a specific Game of Thrones character, but based on an overarching methodology, not just like, oh, because this person talks a lot and you talk a lot, okay, you must be Oberyn Martell. Like, it's not going to be like that. It's a little bit more specific.
Wow, that's so interesting. That's awesome. And you can like curate or make different, how to say, skins of this test with everything, like The Simpsons and like anything you want, like game characters. And this makes everything so much more appealing. Imagine if I discovered that I'm Super Mario for some reason. That's amazing. So Eric, I need to ask you, like, so you can do that. People can do that nowadays, and it's extremely interesting. But why? How useful is this information?
I mean, the first thing that people always ask me. So I've done talks like at different companies to like kind of increase like morale, right, and productivity. But the first question people always ask is like, who should I hook up with now? If I'm not with anyone, who should I? Right, that's like the first thing, right? Like they're like, oh, what's the animal type that I'm best with? And that is one way. I always say like, there's no perfect match, but you'll have consistency on how you get along and how you won't get along based on what animals you are. And certain animal types are going to be able to communicate better with each other, but that's not always the most important thing in a relationship, I guess. Depending on if that's what you're looking for, then definitely don't match up with an animal that doesn't communicate well with you. But at the end of the day, I'm always just like, if you can accept that there's going to be conflict in this realm and you're okay with that, then I'm all good. But that's just one of the ways that it can be helpful for people. It's just understanding, oh, not trying to change the person you're with, but just understanding this is their weakness. But oftentimes the reason why you like them is often based on that weakness, right? For every person, you can't, if someone is attracted to someone who's really flexible and spontaneous and exciting, you can't really get mad at that person for also being a slightly flaky, slightly irresponsible, maybe not necessarily having their life totally structured out, because of course, that's why you fell in love with them in the first place, was that spontaneity, right? You can't fall in love with that and then try to change it, because then you're going to also change the things that you really love about that person. So I think, and this is really useful in relationships, but also useful in the workplace, right? Like not only like working with people better and understanding the best way to communicate with them and make them the most productive, but also understanding what's going to make what you really truly love, right? Like there's a lot of people who come up to me with their midlife crisis, right? And having like, oh, like I'm doing this job for 25 years and I hate it and I don't know why I'm doing it, and that's kind of a cool way to figure out what you really love or what you really want to do.
Wow, like it's powerful. You can use it to improve your loving relationships, not to change the people you love, because but to understand them better and hopefully get more sympathy, right? I saw somewhere that the highest form of love is empathy. I don't know if that's true, but it's a beautiful phrase, and I guess like if you know more about your partner and their personality type, you can get more empathy towards them. On the working setting, though, like you might know a little bit more about your coworkers, but or not even your coworkers, but the people who work beneath you. Would you say that's the benefit?
Yeah, it's beneficial for I think everyone. I mean, it's also, it's always good to know why your boss is the way they are. Of
Oh,
course, you
yeah,
can't really change that, but at least
yeah.
you can kind of get them. At least you can understand it better. But also, yeah, to know the people underneath you who you're working for you. I use it a lot with my teachers, right? I taught this to my teachers with my company so they could work with their students better, right? A lot of teachers have this mindset like, okay, this is what I value. This is what I think is important. And I'm going to take that and put it into this student's brain. And I'm always like, well, that's not really the best approach, right? Because they might be different than you and they might have a different access point to this
Mm.
information. And really, if I always told teachers, if you're teaching a student everything then you're limiting them, right? Because, let's face it, like time is such a powerful thing where generations from now, people will know way more than we do now, right? Like their kids have access to so much more information than I ever did when I was a kid due to the internet and technology. So I think in general, I would try to teach teachers like figure out what your student is and the best, that way you can like connect with them best versus trying to take your mindset and putting it into them. And I think that works for the workforce as well.
Wow, that's so interesting. So teaching them everything that you know is limiting for them. I remember when I was school a long, long time ago, I was in science class and the teacher was saying that the universe was born out of the Big Bang, and that's how it started. It was everything was compressed into this very small particle, and then bam, everything exploded. And then I remember, Eric, I remember asking very vividly, like, is that true? Like, that's exactly what happened. She said, yeah, that's it. And moving on. And now I'm an adult, right? I no one knows for sure. No one knows. Like, that's the most well-known theory that most scientists agree, but it's just a theory, right? The Big Bang theory, as far as I understand, and no one know what was there before and why it happened. But the way she spoke was like, yeah, that's it. Like, shut up. She didn't tell me to shut up, but I think she was limiting myself, right?
Right.
Mm,
Unfortunately, yeah, like that's probably because, and look, this is gonna sound like I'm taking shots at this personality type, but a lot of gatherers, that personality path, become teachers because their
Oh,
value is safety and security, right? So, especially in elementary school, but also in high school, like their idea of like safety and security is keeping something structured, organized, and certainty is something that feels very safe to them, right? If we are certain about things, then in a way it makes us feel more comfortable with our surroundings. And in a certain way it's good, right? Like we want school to be safe, a safe place, especially elementary school. You want things to be maybe not as questioned as much when you're younger, at least to have some like foundational values. But at the end of the day, as we grow up, we start learning like, oh, there are things that we should question. And at the end of the day, the world, we don't know much about this world. We probably know about 10%. And the things that we do know, we have to be okay with like totally changing them if we get new information, right? And does that make us feel a little less safe? Yes. But at the end of the day, it's the truth. But once again, it's based on our personality, right? Some personality types only value the truth. They only value information and they only value objectivity, versus other types want something safe and secure and something that makes us feel comfortable. And they're willing to maybe sacrifice a little of the truth to get that feeling.
ooh. Remember Star Trek? There's Spock that is all about like data analytics and what is true, and then there's the Captain Kirk, which is more about the emotion and I don't know. I would say they balance each other a little bit, right?
Yeah, Spock is a great example of the Smith type.
Oh,
As I mentioned, the four packs, he's a Smith. He's very, I mean, at their worst, they can be cold and almost seem a little insensitive because they're so objective. But, he's pure logic, right? And Kirk is a perfect example of the hunter. He's all about excitement. Like what makes him excited? Obviously, it's like fighting with people like he's much more better as a captain versus I remember in the movies they turn him into an admiral and he's like in a supervisory role and they're just like, yeah, that's not the best spot for you. You're better running a ship when you can like fly around, right? Versus being in a desk job, you know. And McCoy, who's the doctor, Bones, he would be the gatherer type, and he's always the more cautious of the three. He's always the more conservative of the three, and he's always the more grounded of the three, right? He's always like, wait, guys, like, what does this really matter? Like, you're getting in over your head. We got to be like safe in this situation, and makes sense. He's a doctor, so.
yeah, that's so interesting. And that's maybe why it works so well, right? Because they are all not the same. If you think a little bit about, I watched Sonic 3 the other day. Each one of the characters, they're so like different from each other. Like they have Sonic, Tails, or Knuckles, and then Shadow, and I don't know their personality types, but they are very different from each other. And I think that's what makes the movie so interesting. Imagine if they're all exactly the same. It would be super boring. Yeah, yeah,
You want to bounce characters off of each
yeah,
other, right? And you don't
yeah.
want and I mean, I usually use personality types. Funny enough, my academic background is in screenwriting.
Oh,
That's what I studied in school, like creative writing. And, you can really use a lot of personality types as you're typing fictional characters and also use it when you're writing them, right? Because you're like, okay, I got to make sure these people are different. And like, because this person's this personality, because this person's this personality, it's cool because I know that they're probably going to like conflict on this specific consistent thing, and they'll get along on this specific consistent thing.
how do you go about assessing the personality type of your students?
There's a little. I mean, I mentioned in the book. There's some tricks. Like
Mm.
sometimes I'll have them take the test. I usually do, but I don't always go with what the test says, right? Because I did create the test, but once again, it's cookie cutter. It doesn't always match up, and I also don't know how the kids are gonna answer, right? So at the end of the day, I kind of just try to figure out what their core value is, and if they're most kids there are like all people, the majority of people are going to have their core value be safety and security. So one of the tricks I use actually is when I'm working with a kid, I'll make jokes at my mom's expense. Like I'll make fun of my mom, right? Like, oh yeah, my mom, blah blah blah. You know, I don't know. I'll make fun of her for being slow, or I'll tell them stories about my dad used to make fun of her, and I see the kid's reaction. And generally, if the kid's reaction is like horror or just like terrified or scared for me or almost offended that I would insult my mom in that way, they're probably a gatherer. Because gatherers have like a sense of like order, and which is sweet, right? Like they're like, oh, you shouldn't be making fun of your mom. You should be making fun of your family. Like you're making fun of authority, right? And so they're either going to be scared that I'm doing that or like offended. And that's generally how I tell they're a gatherer. Now, if they don't react that way, then it usually pushes them on the other, like one of the other three packs. And usually, well, hunters will usually just laugh because they think it's hilarious and they love a little mischief. So generally that points them to in that direction. But that's just one of the ways, one of the tricks you can use, right?
Ooh.
I don't like to ask specific questions because generally when you ask specific questions, people get defensive, right? So it's better to say certain things and watch how people react. Excuse me. And then that's the best way to figure out what someone really is.
Wow. So you probe them through funny jokes or like informal communication, nothing too direct.
Yeah. I mean, especially with adults, right? With adults, we're the worst adults, right? Because we're so defensive and we like put up these barriers. We might not even know who we are. I've had adults take the test or tell me like they're this animal type. I'm like, no, you're not that animal type. And they'll pick the exact opposite. And I'm like, come on, no. I mean, even if at least you should be a little close, right? But they're so opposite of what the animal that they chose, because I think we often deceive ourselves, right? Or we want to be something that we're not. And that's the whole point of the book, was to help people appreciate who they are and truly value themselves for who they are versus trying to be something based on what another person values.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned before, everyone wants to or feel like the main character, right? And they want to prove that any way they can by picking their own animal type. Yeah.
No, for sure. Everybody wants to be Harry Potter, right?
Does it ever happen that the personality types overlap? So, for example, let's say, did you ever happen to have a kid that you are not sure which personality type they have because they have so many of traits of different ones? Is that a thing?
It's tricky because I always base it on values versus what people do on the outside, right? So it's not like if someone you can confuse certain personality types from the outside because they might seem similar, but then if you ask them why they did that, they might have done that for a totally different reason. Like I'm always saying, like, using myself as an example, and then I'll use another animal as a peacock. Baboons and peacocks sometimes can seem similar because we're both kind of loud and we both talk and we both project. But I always say, like, the extroversion that a peacock shows might be like dancing on a table in Cabo doing body shots, versus a baboon, the extroversion they show might be doing a TED talk. And those are totally different things, right? Like, then you would not want, if you switch them, I would not want to be doing a bunch of body shots in Cabo. And a peacock probably wouldn't be want to do a TED talk on, global warming, right? Like, that's just not in our wheelhouse. So I think even though we might appear similar, I think, and other personality types might appear similar, if you ask them deep down inside why they do the things they do, you'll see that difference.
Gosh, that's so interesting. Yeah, but again, you assess that by analyzing their values and talking to them. It never happens that you just meet someone, hey, by the way, here's the here's the test, do it right now. That's a bit too direct, right? Yeah.
Even though a lot of people love it, they're like, oh,
Really?
website, let me take it. Everyone wants to take the test, right? And I'm like, no, and they'll say, no, I think you're this. And they're, yeah, but the test said this. I'm like, why don't you just trust me versus the test that I made? It's so funny how people want that kind of certainty of academia, right? Because we're so used to tests and we associate that with academia and like, oh, this is certain, this is the truth. I'm like, it's just a test that I created. Why would you use that versus like the thing that I'm telling you based on my years of experience and my intuition and the information that I've gotten from you just based on what I've seen and observed versus the information that you plugged into a test. But
Yeah, people are so caught up in those tests. I remember I did once one of those tests, online tests, like random, and it popped out that I'm the same personality trait as Elon Musk. It was like, okay, where's my rocket company? I don't know, like, so when there's human touch, I know from psychologists as well, right? Sometimes they have clients who come to them, oh, I have I have depression, I have ADHD. Like they just did those tests, which I'm not saying they all misguiding, but a lot of them, like they're not 100% precise. And then they start talking with like a human. There's the human touch, and it just changed perspective a little bit. The human, at least for now, can, from my understanding, can catch up a little of those how say nuances that the test not necessarily not necessarily can. And I would assume that's the same with personality tests. That yeah.
I always look at in the book I mentioned it's a craft, it's not a science, right? And it's like cooking. Like yeah, you could cook with a recipe, but at the end of the day, obviously most professional chefs they cook by feel, right? They're just like, okay, and even if they have a recipe, they adjust based on whatever is in the moment, right? You never know. Like your oven, not no two ovens are the same. Things elevation might be different. Like things are different to the point where we have to make nuanced judgment based on our experience. And so I look at personality typing in that same way. It's a craft that you learn by doing and getting better at it and adjusting. And that's way more valuable than taking some like test that's like written in cookie cutter.
Man, I really like this cooking analogy. Yeah, every kitchen is different. Like a lot of recipes that I do in Brazil, I do it here, and they have a completely different result because of the water, the ingredients. So, yeah, yeah. So, would you say that the same way like personality types they evolve over time? So maybe if you have an assessment right now of someone, like right now, it won't be the same in 5 months or 1 year. So the first question would be, do they evolve? And if they do, how long or what needs to happen in order for them to evolve?
I always say people can't change, but they can grow,
Oh,
right? And so if you find out that as you've grown through your experience, you're actually another personality type, it probably just means that you didn't really know yourself that well and you typed yourself incorrectly, right? Like a lot of people, especially if you type yourself as a gatherer, because there's so much gather influence. Let's say your parents are gatherers, but you're not, but they're telling you this is the way you should be, and society's telling this is the way you should be. You might find yourself living a life where you're trying to be something and you think you're this, but over the course of time, especially generally when you get out into the real world, become an adult and interact with people and find people that may be similar to your true type, then that's when you start realizing, oh, I never was that type. I really am more this type. And I think that's kind of important to know, even though I try to tell students and get them to understand their personality type early on, because I do think we evolve, right? We evolve in the way that fits our personality type. I always say puppies don't grow into cats, they grow into dogs. And like we're all like let's say you're a little shark, you're a little shark, you're not going to grow into like a warm, friendly elephant. You're going to grow up into a stronger, just as direct, maybe not as mean, but just as direct and aggressive shark. That's the way that you're going to grow up, at least if we want to be healthy, right?
yeah, but the environment do affect you at some degree, right? Because I used to have a cat and like several dogs around, and the cat, at least for the first years, thought like she was a dog. I'm not joking. Yeah, yeah. Like she would like wig her tail a little bit and have the tongue out for no reason whatsoever, just because the dogs did it. So I would say like the environment influences you, and but at some point, for some reason, like it was embedded in her DNA. The cat just realized she was not a dog. She was a cat. She stopped doing all the dog behaviors because that's just wasn't who she was. Is that the case with humans as well? Like, regardless of our environment, can we also like grow into our own personality type?
Yeah, that's a big thing too, because oftentimes you always hear like, oh, I'm from this country, so I'm going to be like this, or
Yeah.
people from this country are like that. And I'm like, physical touch, they're very showy. They love to like the showing expressive emotion, right? And let's say you grow up in a traditional Japanese household in Japan, and where in Japan is not very touchy. You bow. There's physical contact is not
Yeah.
necessarily something that's looked up at, and so I think a peacock would really kind of have a tough time there, right? Now they would try to adjust, like you said, they'd be like the cat, they'd adjust and they'd try to act the way that they're being told to act. But at the end of the day, they're not going to feel like fully appreciated. And then if you flip that, like I had a friend who was Cuban and he was a shark. Sharks do not love physical contact. They're just like, no, this is my personal space and stay out of it, right? But he's Cuban, so his family was very huggy and touchy, and he was just like, God, like I hate it because I'm just like, stay away from me. So I always feel like our personality type is not affected by culture or the culture and the things around us as much as whatever our personality type we have, the culture, it determines how we react to that culture, so.
Wow, that's so interesting. What I see. So, what do you think would happen? I think I know the answer, but what do you think would happen if you never find your tribe? Let's say you always stay in that environment where you're a shark and you don't like the physical touch, but that's just the norm. That's basically everyone around you, and there's nothing you can do. Like over time, how destructive this can be to your psyche.
Terrible. It'd be
Yeah,
like, I mean, you could force yourself. I mean, I associate with like people who are left-handed and are forced to be right-handed their whole life, like, and they're going to be okay. But at the end of the day,
yeah.
why? Like, you switch to your left hand and haven't switched to the left hand, they'll be like, oh my God, like life is so much easier now, right? And I think at the end of the day, we want emotionally and intellectually, psychologically, it seems better to be ourselves, right? Like at the end of the day, you got to be yourself.
Yeah, and if you take the personality test, you know who you are, and you're taking certain steps to go find your tribe and to be yourself because now you know who you are, right? Yeah. Go ahead.
Sometimes it's not going to click right away. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. Where it's like, just because you're a certain personality doesn't mean you're destined to be good at something and you're destined to have these strengths. It just means that that's what you're going to like. And if you like it, then you're going to do it more. And if you do it more, you're going to get better at it. So I think at the end of the day, like once you figure out who you are, at least you'll be growing in the right direction versus growing in a way that's totally opposite of where you should be growing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I heard the other day that delusion is also great too. Let's say you don't know any of your personality types, but you have this delusion that you're gonna be a great rock star one day. Just by having this delusion over time, you're gonna work towards this goal because it's like they have this law of attraction thing. I don't know how real it is, but I think to a certain degree it works, and I would say this can influence your personality type. Would you agree?
That delusion or fake it till you make it
Yeah, yeah.
is such a hunter thing. And so
Ah,
hunters are one pack, and that's why they are really good at throwing themselves out there. And they're also not afraid of failure too, though. So they're the kid who growing up, they always got hurt. They always broke their arm on the monkey bars or whatever, because they're just like, oh, I'm just going to do it because this is exciting and fun and risky. And if I take the risk and I fail, who cares? Because you know what? I'll live to live another day. And if I don't, then I'm not going to be here anyway. So they do have that kind of fake it so you make it vibe of just like, hey, I'm going to be great. And, because at the end of the day, if they don't hit that mark, they're generally not going to hold themselves. They're not going to be like, oh my God, my life is over. They have such a short-term memory where they're just like, okay, I'll go on to the next thing. Right. Like, which makes sense in a lot of the things they do, right? They become athletes generally, they become firefighters, they become things that are very action oriented to where they have to adjust on the fly and they can't, nothing can be precious because every new thing might change their world, right? They might be traveling a lot, whatever it is, that's going to make sense for them. Versus if you put a gather in that situation, it can be a little trickier, because if you have safety and security, you might be overly cautious and you might not be the best salesperson, right? Because you're going to be constantly worried about whether you're taking too many risks.
yeah, yeah. I had Damon Wells on the podcast the other day. So Damon Wells is a army colonel, and he's currently stationary here in Stuttgart, in Germany. And throughout our conversations, I asked him like, how many other places have you been stationary before? I said, dude, all across the world. Like, and I love it. I just love it. I cannot stay in a single place for too long. And I was like, gosh. I cannot imagine living like that. It's like that's what fuels me, like every time, like after a certain period of time, I just go all across the world, go somewhere else. He's been everywhere. Like such an interesting person, but it's again, it's like a completely different personality type. Yeah,
Right? Like if you told someone else that,
yeah,
they'd be like, "What? No, like how about a house? How are you going to establish a life?" To
yeah.
them, that's not like life. For a lot of people, they're like, "What is that?" And but for him, that's like, so that's what fuels him. I have a funny story. Like, what's not? I don't know. It's super funny, but I was talking to my cousin's kid, and I've been repeating this story a lot because it's so perfect for personality. And my cousin's kid just graduated from pharmacy school, or
Oh.
he's about to graduate. And I asked him, I was like, oh, like, so then now what do you want to do? And he's like, I don't know, but as long as I don't have to stay in the same place all day long.
Ooh.
And I'm like, that's exactly what pharmacists do, right? Because he was going on a gatherer path. Gatherers love, I mean, most pharmacists are gatherers. It's a perfect job for them because it's safe, secure. You make good money. You can have a family, and you know what your schedule is, right?
Yeah.
Whereas he was just like, oh, I just don't want to be in that same place. I'm like, well, you picked the wrong profession. And so I did recommend maybe you should go into pharmaceutical sales, because as a salesperson, you will be going to different places. It's riskier. You're going to have to hustle, but you will be able to travel and you'll do different things, and you will be rewarded based on how well you do, which is kind of cool. And he was just like, well, I don't want to like waste all this education that all this knowledge that I learned. I'm like, yeah, but you only have one life. So would you rather waste that by doing something you don't want to do? And he was just like, oh, I guess that's right. And so I don't know what decision he chose, but that's a good way of seeing how our personality type and knowing it can help us in making not only decisions based on who we want to be with, but also what job we want to do.
Damn, that's such a good way of convincing someone. Would you rather waste your whole life because you had to study for a few years? That's wonderful. Like, this is motivational. Yeah.
Made the right decision. I get a lot of, the funny thing is certain types, like I mentioned, the shamans do not have a midlife crisis only because their entire life is a midlife crisis. Right?
What?
They're the ones who want, yeah, they want self-knowledge, right? So they're always wondering, wait, am I doing the right thing? No matter how happy they are, they're always thinking, oh, I don't know if this is the right thing. And they're always questioning themselves. And that's kind of their evolutionary arc, is like realizing, having confidence in who they truly are. But the nice thing about that is, since they're always doing that when it comes time to, like, when they're 40 or 45, they're often, if they've put in the work, they're often in a situation where they truly love what they're doing and they're doing it well. And they're actually pretty happy and like, kind of like, okay, I'm good. This is matches who I am, versus a lot of gatherers who, if they never thought about that kind of thing, and then they turn 40 and they realize they're in a life that they never wanted because they never had a chance to reflect, because they were never told that they should reflect, because they were always told that whatever they wanted matched what they should want. So that's the downside.
Damn, that's so interesting. Yeah, I watched this interview with Joe Rogan the other day. And someone asked him, like, have you ever thought about retirement? When are you retiring, bro? Like, you're not the youngest out there. He was like, what? Pff, I don't think about that. I'm gonna keep doing it until I don't like doing it, and I'm gonna keep doing things forever. I don't think about stopping. Every day I discover new things. I keep going, and so would you like, based on that, would you say he's from that personality type?
Joe Rogan, I mean, he probably, just because of what I know from Joe Rogan and
Yeah.
his show, no, but he is also probably from one of the other minority. So shamans only make up about 8 to 10% of the population, but Smiths also only make up about 8 to 10% of the population, and they seek information. Joe Rogan seems like a Smith. Like, he just wants to know things. Like, he likes information. He likes kind of just like, bullshitting and talking about, like, and figuring out new things and kind of like playing with ideas, and ideas are fun for him. And whether it's an idea that's controversial, probably is more fun for him. But for him, he's probably just looking at it objectively and just like, oh, okay, this is fun. And that definitely seems much more so like a Smith. But they also can often find themselves in jobs where they enjoy it, and then it doesn't seem like work. They can be workaholics almost, because for them, the job is fun. If the job is fun, to them, that is like the reason that they're living, right? And they'll be just like, okay, like, I have a story I wrote in the book. A friend of mine we were supposed to have lunch, and but her boss said he wanted to meet her, and we were living near the beach. And so she's like, oh, my boss is coming to have a work meeting. And this is Sunday afternoon. And I was like, your boss is coming to have a work meeting on Sunday? Like, really? Like, she's like, yeah, why is that weird? I'm like, well, I don't know. It's a Sunday, and he's got his kids with him. And she's like, yeah, but we got to talk about stuff, I guess. And I'm like, okay. So she's like, yeah, I'll go meet him, but I'll be back in like an hour. I'm like, okay. She comes back in 10 minutes. And I'm like, what happened? And she's like, it wasn't a work meeting. He just wanted me to meet his kids. And they were down here visiting the beach. And he just thought that it would be fun for me to meet his kids. I'm like, see, I told you that he wouldn't be doing that. And she's like, yeah, but like, why would I want to meet his kids? I'm like, because, and then that's when I said, because he's a gatherer. And for gatherers, like, it's important, like, to have safety and security for their coworkers and the people working with them, to know the people they love. Like, it feels good, which is not a bad thing. it all feels like family. But for her, she's a Smith, so she was just not even thinking about that. She was like, I don't care about family. Like, I thought we were going to discuss like work stuff, you know, and I would do it on a Sunday afternoon. That was her mindset. So it just shows the difference in personalities, right?
That's such an interesting way of putting it. It just makes interactions easier. Like, oh yeah, she's a Smith. Oh no, he's a getter. No, like you just like kind of understand what makes people click, and it's a little bit calming in a way, I would say, from what you're saying, right? Because otherwise, I would imagine this person would just stay ruminating the whole time. Why he think I wanted to meet her kids, his kids? I don't care. Like he's annoying, you know. But if you just sit down and say no, you know, he's this personality type, so everything's fine. Okay, you know, it just makes things a little bit calmer, I would say, by understanding those types. Yeah.
People are not always out to get us, even if they're doing things that are different than us. They're not out to get us. They're just because that's what's natural to them versus what's natural to us. You know, like I was associate like competing in a sports event, right? Like if you're playing sports, the person that you're playing against is not out to get you. They're just trying to do the same thing that you're trying to do, which is to compete, have fun, and win. And at the end of the day, we can still coexist and live together, right? And at the end of the game, you're still going to be buddies, and you're still going to be all right with each other.
Eric, so how long does it take to do the test? We can do it on your, yeah.
Like 3 to 5 minutes. This is it was designed to be fairly short. You know, it went through a lot of user testing, obviously to make sure that the results would be accurate, but also to make sure that it's like somewhat entertaining to take, or at least quick to take. And yeah, you can take it on, I believe it's on the university page.
Oh,
and yeah.
What should
but
I
if you
talk?
look at, you know what, actually, if you put Utopia project,
Yeah.
just like that, Utopia project assessment, it should come up because I can see that search. Oh, Utopia project, yeah, that'll work. And yeah, there you go, the Utopia 16 assessment. And if you take it, but I can probably guess I'm guessing based on the test that told you that you were like Elon Musk. Because if you are like,
I'm not.
no,
But no. The test said I was, but I don't trust it. It was like a random Facebook test, you know.
You know, I would say, you know, like once again, just because you're like Elon Musk and the same personality type doesn't mean you're like Elon Musk, right? But I would say, you know, that's not. If I had to guess, even if you hadn't told me that, I would probably guess something along that range. I would have guessed like a chimpanzee or a baboon would be my guess, and those do appear similar just because of how you speak and what you're doing, and you seem very interested in ideas and like to talk about ideas. So chimpanzees love ideas. For them, ideas are fun, and they love to talk about them, and they love to bounce off things, you know. So they're in the Smith category. So
Really? Wow. I'm a Smith baboon.
well, I don't know.
Chimpanzee. You said, yeah.
Chimpanzee. Yeah. Baboons we're shamans, but chimpanzees and baboons can appear similar because they both like to talk about ideas.
Yeah.
But there is a difference between the two. My father was a chimpanzee, so I know that type very well.
Want to see if you're right? Would you like to?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. Let you do the test, and we'll see.
All right. So, everyone, I'm sharing the screen right now. So there's 4 rounds.
I won't say anything.
No, you can comment. It's fine. So please select 7 words or phrases that best reflect your personality. I like to meditate. I like to take action. I like fantasy. Let's see. Fast. Just fast. That's weird. Practice. Enlightenment. Endurance. Research. Oh, I do research. Spirituality. Club. Oh, magical. Science fiction. Playing sports. Compassion. Pleasure. Okay. Submit. So that was the first one. Now we're going to round 2 of 4. Please select 7 words or phrases that best reflect your personality. Phoenix, robot, physics, passion, humankind, music. Let's say music. I do play the guitar. Fate, blunt, poetry, wishful. I am wishful. Let's mark this one. Theorize, logic, university, ecstatic, virtue, dominate, not sure what.
Oh, tough.
Tough. Detached, clear-minded, intensity. That's I'm intense. So I assume I'm not done yet. I need to select other things as well. Let's say passion, blunt, theorize, and a little bit detached, I would say. I would say a little bit detached. All right, round number 3. Please select 7 words or phrases that best reflect your personality. education, counselor, crusader, conflict resolution, easygoing, mischief, yes, initiate, research, muse, teamwork, perfectionist, spontaneous, down to earth, trust, community, organization skills, lone wolf, wow, a little bit, revolution, controversial. There you go. Now, last one, round number 4. Please select 7 words or phrases that best reflect your personality. Power, contemplative, yes, artsy, good at everything, persuasive, health, aggressive, public speaker, yes, I'm doing the podcast right now. Funny, I try, I don't always do. Sacrifice, peace, storytelling, charisma, daydream, satire, listening. There we go. Now we're gonna get the result. Am I a monkey?
I know it's going. Yeah.
Humpback whale. What?
Wow. I would, and this is going to sound like I'm just trying to get my correct answer here, but you were this close to getting a baboon. And the last one.
Not a
monkey? And I would say a baboon, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So humpback whales and baboons are both shamans, and they're both right next to each other on my methodology scale, meaning they're going to be similar in a lot of ways. Though you do strike me as more of a baboon, but I could be wrong. So a humpback whale, like if you think of like someone like leading the village in like a spiritual way, the humpback whale would be the soul, and the baboon would be the voice of a community. Wow. And so, because you're doing a podcast, you joke around a lot, like you a lot of the ways, even when you said mischief, that's a little bit more baboon-ish. But that's why I'm always saying it's like, but you're pretty close. So I would always recommend if you just read the portraits on the website. Like that's probably the best way. So if you read the humpback whale, the full portrait, and you read the baboon portrait, you can kind of go, oh yeah, I might be more this, or you might be the humpback whale. So, like in school, were you more of a class clown or were you more of a daydreamer?
Oh, class clown for sure.
Oh, yeah. That's generally baboon versus. That's how I usually determine the two. Baboons are the ones who are like in the back of the class talking a lot, and maybe it doesn't mean that their teachers are not going to like them though, because they're not bad students. They might misbehave, but they might still be into like what they're learning, and they might like reading and fantasy. They might be into a lot of the academic stuff they're doing. They might not necessarily do it in the way that a teacher would prefer them to do it, but since they're kind of into it, then the teacher tends to be okay with them joking around and talking a little too much in class. But yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting. Yeah, I need to read the baboon description later. Just for context for everyone listening, I will read the humpback whale description real quick. So, daydreamer extraordinaire. You are an old soul, oh my god, floating peacefully and sometimes aimlessly in the waters of your own reflection. You are the most intuitive of all types, and while society doesn't always take kindly to your esoteric behavior, it is your intuition that helps you stay strong in these moments of persecution and doubt, exuding a quiet confidence that whispers to the rest of us, I know something that you don't. And if everyone were to be truthful, they would admit the same. All right. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I identify myself more as a baboon. But like we talked before, right? Like it's more like a human thing. You need to talk when you talk to someone, it's easier to assess.
Right. And once again, those words, like you picked the panimal type that's right next to the baboon. So at the end of the day, it was really, for my test at least, the methodology there is like those words you chose at the last round were determining whether it was a baboon or humpback whale. That's why I was really quiet, because like, oh, it looks like you're going to a baboon. And then it probably was just one or two words, 1 or 2 word difference that you chose. That so at the end of the day, you're probably a baboon. That's probably more similar.
Yeah, I would agree, because I also rushed through the whole thing because we're live on the podcast. I probably would think a little bit better on my answers if I was on my own. All right, Eric, I want to make sure that everyone knows the name of your book, where they can find you, and take it away.
Yeah, the book's called Personality, and you can find it anywhere you buy books. Like if you want to give Jeff Bezos your money, buy it on Amazon. But if you go to your local bookstore, you can order it from there, or Barnes & Noble. Wherever you are, you can get it. And did you mention you were in Germany? Because there's actually a German version that's out. I have a German publisher, and the German version just came out, I believe, in September. And I don't know the name of that because it's in German. But once again, you can get it anywhere. It's also coming out in Turkey. And if you want to find me, you can find me at utopiaproject.com is where you can take the test. And strangely enough, I have another website, which is more like my life coaching site, and that's projectutopia.com. So you just reverse it. But yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Let's look for the name of the book in Germany. A lot of my listeners are German, so I would say that's the one. Yeah, that's the one. So entschlüssele deine Persönlichkeit, wie du mit 16 Tier-Archetypen deine Stärken, Fähigkeiten, Fehler erkennst. There you go. All right, Eric, do you have any final remarks? Anything else that you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here, man. It was a pleasure. Very interesting. For real. Thank you. All right, everyone. You know what's up? It's time to talk about the giveaway. Subscribe, comment, anything. What you thought about the video, what you thought about our personality types conversation, and you might win this beautiful t-shirt. We're gonna announce the winner at the end of March 2025. All you have to do to win this Brewcast Power Up t-shirt, to run and maybe win the t-shirt, is subscribe and comment. That's it. It's that easy. So subscribe and comment. All right, everyone. It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much, and see you next time. Bye-bye. All right. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rank the show 5 stars. This will ensure that the podcast is recommended to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. Check out now the Brewcast store, Explore store, filled with awesome goodies from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered. Stay in style with Brewcast. Embrace the shock, set the trend. Buy now at brew-cast.com/store. Again, that's brew-cast.com/store. Link on the description below. Be a Brewcast model and get free stuff. We'd love to see how you and your loved ones enjoy Brewcast. Snap a picture of yourself, your family, your friends, or even your pets wearing Brewcast merch, or watching an episode of the show, and send it to us and become part of Brewcast. We will feature you and your pictures at the end of every episode, just like the ones you're seeing on the screen right now. You can upload your pictures at brew-cast.com/contact or tag us on social media. Alright, everyone, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much, and see you next time. Bye-bye.